Time for us to go to South Australia and the state budget, and we've seen some really interesting commentary that now we've had about a week to digest it. Adrian Pederick, he is the member for Hammond, which is based out of the Murray-Lands and into some of the South Coast. He joins us now. Hi Adrian, how are you?
Yeah, g'day Wayne, g'day listeners. Yeah, great, thank you. How are you?
Really good. It's been a really interesting time because it's taken me a few days to get my head around where the budget is in terms of spending for regional areas. So you've made a comment in a press release about your concern about a roundabout in Mount Barker at $40 million for the state budget that's been put in place. And we all know the roundabout. We've all passed the old Mount Barker Oval there and Alexander Road. We've driven on it many times over the years ourselves. But that's the big ticket item for roads. There doesn't seem to be any new money for very much else except for a few markers and a little bit of education for motorbike riders.
Well, and that's the problem here. I mean, we've got Mount Barker, which I hardly class as regional anymore. I mean, it's got a population now of about 16,000 people and heading to 60,000, which will be a problem. And look, this roundabout, I would have gone around it hundreds of times. I can't see what problem we're fixing. I don't know that there's been any serious crashes there at all, and I'm happy to be corrected. But there's a $98 million budget for road safety package, and $40 million of it is going into this one roundabout. I mean, we've got a whole range of projects across the state that should be getting accelerated, whether it's the Truro Freight Bypass, whether it's the Princess Highway upgrade, whether it's the Harndorf Bypass project. And I mean, we've also got to look at things like the Swamport Bridge duplication, the South East Links, which is duplication of the Dukes Highway out from Tailem Bend towards the Mallee Highway, and the Greater Adelaide Freight Bypass. These are big projects that will all need, in the end, billions of dollars. And here we are tinkering around with a very measly amount of money being assigned to the so-called regions, with most of this road safety money being assigned to Mount Barker.
It's interesting that the RAA also, in trying to put out a release without being scathing to the government, it appears that their intention was to highlight some of the points that you've made, that there are significant other projects. I mean, there are roadworks that are building up that need to be done across regional South Australia that are behind that extra money outside of about, say, the $400 million of general maintenance that the state government puts up each year. These are projects that are just needing desperate help, where roads are critically falling apart, where bridges need to be upgraded, let alone any new projects like the freight bypass that you've mentioned.
Look, absolutely. And the sad thing is we've got a $3 billion road maintenance backlog, and this really, really needs to be addressed. And I'm so proud of what we did in our sadly short time in government, where we got multiple roads, I think it was 8 roads across the state, back to 110 kilometres an hour, and we did that relatively cheaply for about $42 million, a lot of shoulder sealing and some other works in certain places to get them up to speed. But the disappointing thing is we've got these major arterial routes that need more work. We've got the general upgrades that need to be more work done. And we've basically got a bit of rats and mice stuff in the budget, and we'll have to do a lot of teasing out in the budget to see when these bigger projects will be funded. Okay,
let's say on the health side, and Mount Barker Hospital, which desperately needed an upgrade, I don't think anyone is saying that the $100 million being spent there is not necessary. There was monies that were promised last year for both Keith and for Narracoord, but are you surprised that really the only other items that come under notice, it's $1 million for a planning paper on Narracoord, and then there's 3 ambulance stations getting some updates or upgrades at Victor Harbour, Mount Barker and Gawler. It hardly seems like the state government's sought to spend any money in a health sense in any of the regional electorates.
No, not in a decent way at all, and you're absolutely right. We've got a government that came to power saying they'd fix ramping, and they would put hundreds of extra doctors, hundreds of extra nurses and hundreds of extra paramedics into regional communities. And I've had this conversation with the government, and I've presented 1,854 signatures to State Parliament about the lack of the emergency service opening up at Strathalbyn Hospital, and I've challenged the government. I said, well, you've said you're going to supply these extra health professionals, but they just refuse to open it up appropriately. It will be a nurse-based service, and no disrespect to nurses, but essentially what will happen, there'll be an after-hours service, well, close to after hours from 4 till 8 in the evening, and you've got to book in, and if you need any stitches, it won't be any good. So in the end, I don't think people will go along. On weekends, it'll be open up till 4, and I think it's 10 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon. So it's a real issue. Us regional MPs obviously understand the importance of health services, road services, all services across the regions, but it's a very, very city-centric budget. That is the problem.
All right, let's then take a look at this bypass of freight, the Greater Adelaide bypass. This has been mooted for a long time. It's to take freight from Murray Bridge around the hills, on the outside of the hills, rather than down the freeway and through the tunnels. We know of the accidents that have occurred at the bottom end of the freeway, and the issues that freight rollovers and that the other associated problems with driving down Portrush Road or Glen Osmond Road with massive big trucks there. So you put up this idea for this freight bypass to take that transport around Adelaide. Why has it not received any planning money?
Well, we put up GlobeLink and that got knocked back, but that was before the last election. But the Greater Adelaide Freight Bypass, we actually this was another project down the track where we put up $10 million to have a look at that. So we put that money in when we're in government, and yet this conversation is still ongoing, obviously, and it's something we need to flesh out in estimates, because we do need to make it easier for freight companies to go round to the north of Adelaide. I mean, look, there's already a lot of freight that comes round to the north. It comes up to the freight bypass we've got now, but it puts people close to 100 kilometres diversion around Adelaide, which is a fair chunk of time and effort to do that, but it does go from Murray Bridge to Mannum, up through Sedan, up to the Sturt Highway at a place called Halfway House. And the issue is anything bigger than a B double has to go round there. So road trains, AB doubles and that kind of thing have to go that way. So there is quite a bit of freight has come off the freeway already. And it's interesting to note that the two accidents that happened were both sort of tray-top sized trucks. But we'd like to see a project like that accelerated to make it safer for commuters and to open up the options to make linking freight into Adelaide and also making the Adelaide road safer for everyone.
All right, let's just add a final point. There are a couple of places that did get some money, and not in your electorate anymore, but your old stomping ground down at Kermaduk. They had to wait till you weren't the member for Kermaduk to put some money into the school that you once went to.
Well, look, absolutely. There's been some funding into some of the regional schools, and Meningie used to be near the edge of my electorate as well. Meningie's got a bit more to finish off the area school there. Kermaduk's getting $1.6 million to upgrade a science lab there, and there'll be a full fit out of another room, which will be magnificent and well needed, and which comes after the sad closure of Canalpin Primary School. But this is another hit on population in the area. But look, there has been some good funding meted out to some of the regional schools, and I think there's one down at Mount Gambier as well, at Yarl, and one or two others. So that is all handy. But when you look at the size of the budget, which will be something around 22 or 23 billion, those of us who live in regional South Australia just want a fair go to make sure that we get the right outcomes and can get some level of equality for regional citizens.
There has been a question put about the Malinauskas government and its push for a big chunk of money into Mount Barker, that it is associated with politics, and that is that the independent member is Dan Cregan for that area. The federal member is an independent, Rebecca Sharkey. Is that a valid claim when one considers the amount of money that Mount Barker is receiving, given that that the area is now classified, we believe it's to be still regional, albeit that it's very close to Adelaide? Is there politics being played here for maybe future vote harvesting by the Labor government?
Oh, look, absolutely. I think it is. I mean, they're working favourably with the independent members, both state and federally, and you look at the hospital money and good on the community for getting these upgrades. And But, you know, a $220 million hospital being built at Mount Barker, and I can't get my emergency department open in Strathalbyn, so I look at that and it's a terrible outcome for my citizens of Strathalbyn and surrounding districts. But certainly it does look like it's very favourable, and as you said, probable vote harvesting in that area.
All right, Adrian Pederick, who is the member for Hammond, it's good to have you on board to talk about the South Australian budget, and we'll catch up with you another time.
Thanks, Wayne. Thank you, listeners.